In a world where trust is as scarce as clean water, what happens when the enemy you've been fighting becomes your only hope for survival? Episode 45 of Beyond the Gates delivers the most devastating revelation yet. The infection that destroyed civilization wasn't just engineered, it was designed with a fail-safe that only the architects of destruction can unlock, and one of them has just arrived at the sanctuary's gates. Last time on Beyond the Gates, the sanctuary's foundation was shaken to its core. The eastern perimeter was breached in a calculated attack that served as cover for a much deeper conspiracy. Commander Reynolds was exposed as a saboteur who had been orchestrating attacks on the sanctuary from within, while Elena's secret transmissions to the outside were revealed to Marcus. In a stunning twist of loyalty, Elena broadcast Reynolds' own treasonous communications to the entire sanctuary, proving that while she had once been planted as an agent, she had chosen to protect the community she'd come to call home. Dr. Chen discovered evidence that the original infection was deliberately engineered and introduced through the water supply, raising harrowing questions about who unleashed the pandemic and why. As Reynolds was taken into custody, he left Marcus with a chilling warning. The real threat was already inside the gates, hidden among the survivors. The episode closed with Marcus and Maya surveying their damaged but enduring sanctuary, determined that whatever threats remained, the community they'd built would survive. As episode 45 opens, the aftermath of Reynolds' betrayal and capture has settled over the sanctuary like a heavy fog, leaving our characters navigating a landscape where old certainties have crumbled and new alliances are still taking shape. Marcus Winters stands at a crossroads unlike any he's faced before. The military strategist who reluctantly became the sanctuary's leader now finds himself questioning every decision, every appointment, every relationship that brought them to this point. What Marcus fears most is no longer the external threats beyond the walls, but the possibility that his judgment has been compromised by personal attachments, particularly his trust in Elena. What he wants is certainty in a world increasingly defined by shades of gray, a clear path forward for a community looking to him for stability. The episode opens with Marcus alone in the detention area, staring through the reinforced glass at Reynolds, who sits calmly on the other side, as if he still holds all the power despite his captivity. Marcus hasn't slept since the Eastern breach, the dark circles under his eyes a testament to the weight he carries. Elena Vasquez has been placed under a form of house arrest, not in the detention center with Reynolds, but confined to her quarters with a guard outside. Her position within the sanctuary has become as complicated as her own loyalties. What Elena fears most is that her chance at redemption has already passed, that regardless of her actions exposing Reynolds, the community will never see her as anything but a traitor. What she wants is the opportunity to prove that her choice to protect the sanctuary wasn't just a momentary decision, but a fundamental shift in allegiance. The episode finds Elena sitting by her window at dawn, watching as sanctuary residents go about their morning routines, her isolation palpable as life continues without her participation. When a young child waves to her, one of the many she helped evacuate during previous attacks, Elena's composure briefly cracks, revealing the emotional cost of her complicated position. Dr. James Chen has become the sanctuary's most valuable asset overnight. His discovery about the engineered nature of the infection has transformed him from respected medical authority to essential strategist. What Dr. Chen fears most is that his research will be weaponized, that in seeking a cure, he might inadvertently provide the means for further destruction. What he wants is to understand the full scope of what they're facing before it's too late. As episode 45 begins, we find Dr. Chen in his laboratory, which has been expanded and reinforced with additional security. He moves between microscopes and computer models with focused intensity, barely registering the assistants now assigned to support his work. When his daughter Maya brings him food he's forgotten to eat, the momentary softening of his expression reveals the humanity beneath the scientist's exterior. Sophia Reyes has emerged from the Eastern Breach incident with newfound authority and purpose. Her quick thinking during the evacuation and her ability to rally civilians behind Marcus's leadership have elevated her status within the sanctuary's hierarchy. What Sophia fears most is that this fragile unity will dissolve under continued pressure. that the next crisis will fragment their community beyond repair. What she wants is to build sustainable structures of governance that can withstand both external attacks and internal discord. The episode opens with Sophia addressing a council of civilian representatives, her previous hesitancy replaced by measured confidence as she outlines plans to create neighborhood security teams, a hybrid model that balances military protection with civilian oversight. Liam Foster finds himself in unfamiliar territory after discovering the structural weaknesses in the sanctuary's design. Once focused solely on maintaining existing systems, he now faces the daunting task of identifying and reinforcing in every potential vulnerability. What Liam fears most is missing something crucial: another deliberately weakened wall, another sabotage system that could cost lives when they can least afford to lose them. What he wants is to transform the sanctuary from a compromised refuge into an impregnable fortress. Episode 45 begins with Liam in the eastern tunnels, now bustling with activity as teams work to repair the breach. He studies updated blueprints, comparing them against the actual construction, his methodical mind cataloging every discrepancy between design and reality. Maya Chen has stepped from the shadows into a central role following her partnership with Liam during the Eastern Breach. Her skills as a scout now enhanced by her growing understanding of the sanctuary's vulnerabilities. What Maya fears most is being too late, connecting the dots only after another attack has succeeded. What she wants is to understand the true nature of the outside force that recruited both Reynolds and Elena, to identify their methods before they can be deployed again. As the episode opens, we find Maya in the sanctuary's archives, poring over personnel records from the early days of settlement, looking for patterns that might reveal other sleeper agents, her expression intensifying as certain names begin to recur in concerning contexts. And in his detention cell, former Commander Reynolds presents a study in controlled patience. Unlike the desperate captive one might expect, he emanates an unsettling calm, as if his capture is merely a phase in a longer game. What Reynolds fears, if he fears anything at all, is not confinement but irrelevance, the possibility that the plans he set in motion might proceed without him. What he wants becomes the central mystery of this episode. Is he a true believer in whatever cause drove him to betrayal, or simply a mercenary whose allegiance might shift again under the right circumstances? Episode 45 begins with Reynolds methodically exercising in his cell, his physical discipline unbroken by captivity, his eyes occasionally drifting to the security camera with the hint of a smile that suggests he knows something his captors don't. A new character emerges in episode 45, Dr. Vivian Marsh, who appears at the sanctuary's northern checkpoint just as dawn breaks. Claiming to be a virologist from a research facility that collapsed early in the outbreak, she requests asylum with an urgency that suggests she brings more than just her expertise. What Dr. Marsh fears is immediately apparent in her haunted eyes and vigilant posture. She believes she's being pursued. What she wants remains carefully guarded, shared only in fragments as the episode progresses. We first see her through the perspective of the perimeter guards, her disheveled appearance and educated speech creating an immediate contradiction that catches their attention. As the sun rises fully over the sanctuary, these 8 individuals move through a community attempting to return to normalcy despite the fractures beneath its surface. The routines of daily life have resumed: food preparation, education, security rotations. But conversations halt when certain names are mentioned, and glances linger longer on faces that might hide secrets. The foundations have been shaken, and episode 45 will test whether what remains is strong enough to withstand the tremors still to come. The episode begins with the sanctuary bathed in the pale light of early morning. The damage from the eastern breach is visible. Scaffolding supports weakened walls, work crews clear debris, and security patrols have doubled along all perimeters. We move from this wider view to the northern checkpoint, where Dr. Vivian Marsh stands before skeptical guards, her credentials and story being scrutinized as sanctuary protocol demands. "I understand your caution," she tells them, her voice steady despite her exhausted appearance. "But what I know about the infection can't wait for standard quarantine procedures." This claim is enough to prompt a call to Marcus, who arrives with Dr. Chen. Their questioning of Marsh is thorough and tense. Chen focusing on her scientific knowledge, Marcus on inconsistencies in her story about where she's been since the outbreak. When Marsh finally mentions a research installation called Threshold, Chen's expression changes subtly, recognition flickering across his features. Take her to medical for evaluation, Marcus orders. Full quarantine protocols. As Marsh is escorted away, Chen pulls Marcus aside, revealing that Threshold was a high-security biological research facility rumored to be working on pathogen response scenarios before communications went dark. If Marsh truly comes from Threshold, her knowledge could be invaluable or dangerously destabilizing. Meanwhile, Liam and his team have discovered something troubling in the eastern tunnels. The breach wasn't simply a structural weakness, it was an elaborate mechanism designed to fail under specific conditions. This level of engineering sophistication suggests resources far beyond what they've attributed to outside scavenger groups. Whoever built this, Liam explains to Sophia, who has come to assess the repairs, they weren't trying to get in quickly. They were creating a controlled collapse that would divert our attention from something else. From what? Sophia asks, the question hanging between them as the camera pans to the maintenance shaft beneath the detention center, where a small device pulses with a faint light, unnoticed by the sanctuary's defenders. In the medical wing, Dr. Chen supervises Marsh's evaluation. The standard battery of tests confirms she's not infected, but Chen's interest goes deeper. He questions her about Threshold's research, particularly their work on engineered pathogens. Marsh's answers are technically precise but carefully limited, revealing expertise while withholding specific information. A balance that Chen recognizes from his own habits when protecting sensitive research. You're not telling me everything, Chen finally says when they're alone. Neither are you, Marsh counters. Your water supply analysis. You found the compound, haven't you? The activation trigger. Their conversation is interrupted by Maya, who brings updated security clearances for Marsh. Limited access to medical facilities, constant escort required. The interaction between Maya and Marsh is brief, but loaded with unspoken assessment. Two careful observers taking each other's measure. In the detention area, Marcus finally begins the formal interrogation of Reynolds. Their conversation is a masterclass in psychological warfare. Reynolds alternating between cryptic warnings and pointed questions that suggest he knows Marcus better than Marcus knows himself. Elena made her choice, Reynolds says, studying Marcus's reaction. Have you made yours yet? This isn't about choices, Marcus responds. This is about why you betrayed everything we built here. Reynolds laughs, a sound devoid of humor. What we built here is exactly what we were supposed to build. A controlled experiment in human adaptation. The sanctuary was never meant to be permanent, Marcus. It was designed to evolve or collapse. Those were the only two acceptable outcomes. For who? Marcus demands. For the architects, Reynolds answers, the term landing with deliberate weight. The same people who designed the infection, who selected this location, who chose which skills would be represented in the initial survivor population. Nothing about the sanctuary is random, Marcus. Not even you. This revelation stuns Marcus into silence, giving Reynolds the opening to deliver his most disturbing claim, that the infection was designed with a biological failsafe, a genetic key that can activate or deactivate its most lethal properties. And according to Reynolds, that key arrived with Dr. Marsh. In Elena's quarters, Sophia arrives with a proposition. Despite Elena's betrayal, her knowledge of the outside communications and contacts is invaluable. Sophia offers a form of conditional freedom. Elena can assist with communications monitoring, but under supervision and with limited access. Why are you doing this? Elena asks, suspicious of the offer. Because I remember who you were before all this, Sophia answers. The person who taught me how to set up emergency broadcasts, who stayed up all night trying to contact my family when the networks went down, that person deserves a second chance. The scene between them balances tension and tentative alliance, establishing Sophia as someone capable of seeing nuance in a community increasingly divided into loyalists and suspects. In the medical wing, Dr. Chen begins analyzing Marsh's blood samples, looking for evidence of the genetic marker Reynolds described. As he works, Marsh observes the sanctuary through the laboratory windows, her attention caught by the educational center where children are being taught. You still have schools, she notes with something like wonder. We still have a future, Chen responds, his tone making it clear this is both statement and question. Their professional detachment begins to crack as they compare notes on their experiences since the outbreak. Marsh describes Threshold's slow descent from research facility to armed compound as resources dwindled and outside pressures mounted. When Chen asks why she left, her answer is simple and devastating. Because they started seeing the survivors as test subjects rather than people to save. The revelation comes when Chen's analysis confirms Reynolds' claim. Marsh's blood contains synthetic antibodies specifically designed to target the engineered infection. She isn't just a refugee from Threshold. She was part of the team that developed the pathogen. We were told it was a defensive measure, Marsh explains, her composure finally breaking. A deterrent that would never be deployed. By the time we realized what was really happening, the release protocols had already been initiated. Chen's response is cut short by an alarm, the first sign that the device beneath the detention center has activated. The security system throughout the sanctuary begins to malfunction, doors locking or opening seemingly at random, communications cutting in and out. In the confusion, Reynolds makes his move. The detention center sequence is a brilliantly choreographed display of how thoroughly Reynolds prepared for this moment. The security malfunctions aren't random, but precisely timed to create a path to the northern perimeter. Reynolds moves through the sanctuary with eerie confidence, as if navigating a route he's rehearsed countless times. Marcus leads the response team, coordinating with Sophia, who uses the civilian network to track Reynolds' movement through different sectors. Liam works frantically to override the security system, realizing too late that the eastern breach was indeed a diversion, not just from the device being planted, but from subtle alterations made to the sanctuary's power grid during repairs. As chaos spreads through the sanctuary, Maya makes a critical discovery in the archives. The personnel records she's been reviewing reveal a pattern. Certain residents, all with specialized skills, all arriving within weeks of each other during the sanctuary's early formation. Their backgrounds check out individually, but collectively they represent exactly the expertise needed to rebuild critical infrastructure after a societal collapse. It wasn't random survival that brought these specific skill sets together. It was selection. The converging crises reach their peak as Reynolds approaches the northern perimeter, where a response team, led by Marcus, intercepts him. Their confrontation is brief but brutal. Reynolds fights with the calculated efficiency of someone who has nothing left to lose, injuring several guards before Marcus finally subdues him. As Reynolds is restrained, he locks eyes with Marcus and delivers the episode's most chilling line. You think stopping me changes anything? The architects don't need me anymore. They have all the data they needed from this phase of the experiment. As Reynolds is returned to detention under heavier security, the sanctuary begins the process of recovery. The device is located and carefully disabled by Liam, communications are restored, and the immediate crisis passes. But the psychological damage lingers. Reynolds' escape attempt has confirmed his warnings about deeper vulnerabilities within their systems. In the aftermath, Marcus brings together the core leadership group, Chen, Sophia, Liam, and Maya, along with Elena, whose limited freedom is now extended given her assistance during the crisis, and Dr. Marsh, whose knowledge has become essential rather than simply valuable. In the sanctuary's conference room, they piece together a troubling picture from their collective information. Marsh explains that Threshold was one of several research installations tasked with developing rapid response solutions to pandemic threats. The infection that eventually spread worldwide began as a theoretical exercise, a pathogen engineered to test the limits of containment protocols and treatment development. But somewhere in the chain of command, the decision was made to deploy rather than simply simulate. The world was already reaching critical pressure points, Marsh tells them: resource scarcity, climate migration, political instability. According to certain models, a controlled population reduction followed by guided reconstruction represented the optimal path forward. Optimal for who? Sophia demands, echoing Marcus's earlier question to Reynolds. For whoever believes they should design humanity's next chapter, Marsh answers. The revelation that truly shakes the group comes from combining Marsh's knowledge with Maya's archival discovery and Chen's research. The sanctuary isn't simply a random community of survivors, but a deliberately constructed social experiment. One of several around the world, each testing different governance models and resource allocation strategies in post-collapse conditions. They're studying us, Liam realizes. The attacks, the supply shortages, even the interpersonal conflicts. They're all variables being manipulated to test our responses. This understanding transforms their perception of both past events and future threats. If the sanctuary is an experiment, then everything they've endured has been observed and perhaps even engineered by the same forces that unleash the infection. The episode's final act centers on a crucial decision. Marsh reveals that the antibodies in her blood can be synthesized into a treatment, not a cure for the already infected, but a preventative measure that could protect the sanctuary from the infection's most lethal strains. The catch is that creating this treatment requires equipment and expertise beyond what the sanctuary currently possesses. There's a threshold mobile unit approximately 3 days' journey from here, Marsh explains. They maintain field laboratories for ongoing monitoring of infection patterns. If we can reach that facility, we can produce enough of the treatment to protect everyone in the sanctuary. The proposal divides the leadership. Marcus is deeply skeptical, seeing potential for another trap. Elena, surprising everyone, supports Marsh's claim based on transmission data she intercepted during her time as an informant. Chen and Liam focus on the technical feasibility, while Sophia raises the ethical implications of prioritizing sanctuary residents for treatment when others are suffering beyond their walls. Maya, who has remained characteristically quiet throughout much of the discussion, finally speaks. If what Dr. Marsh is saying is true, this isn't just about protecting ourselves. It's about understanding who did this to us and why. It's about making sure they can't keep using us as lab rats in their experiment. The decision crystallizes. A team will be assembled to journey to the threshold facility, comprised of those with the necessary skills to assess the equipment and synthesize the treatment. Chen will lead the scientific component, with Maya providing security and navigation. Marsh will guide them to the facility, while Marcus, Elena, Sophia, and Liam remain to protect the sanctuary in their absence. As preparations begin for this dangerous mission, private conversations reveal the complex emotions beneath the strategic planning. Chen and Maya share a rare moment of father-daughter vulnerability, acknowledging the risks they're taking and what drives them to accept those risks. Marcus and Elena have their first real conversation since her betrayal, the weight of unresolved feelings hanging between them as they focus on the practical aspects of sanctuary defense during the team's absence. The episode closes with the departure team at the northern gate at dawn, equipped for the journey ahead. The sanctuary residents have gathered to see them off, their expressions a mixture of hope and fear, emotions that have defined life in this community since its inception. 3 days there, 3 days back, Marcus reminds them as final preparations are made. Any longer, and we'll assume the mission is compromised. As the gate opens and the team steps beyond the sanctuary's boundaries, the camera pulls back to reveal a subtle detail. On a distant ridge, barely visible, the silhouette of an observation post with sophisticated equipment trained directly on the sanctuary. The architects are still watching, still collecting their data, still waiting to see how their subjects will respond to this next phase of the experiment. Episode 45 of Beyond the Gates masterfully develops several interconnected themes that have been evolving throughout the season, bringing them into sharper focus as the series approaches its climax. The most prominent theme is the tension between determinism and free will. a philosophical question given tangible form through the revelation that the sanctuary itself is an engineered experiment. If their community was designed rather than organically formed, if the skills and personalities represented were selected rather than randomly surviving, does that negate the genuine connections and governance structures they've built? This question echoes larger debates about human agency in systems designed by others, particularly relevant in our increasingly algorithmic and predetermined world. Reynolds' character embodies one response to this dilemma, accepting the role of puppet while trying to become puppet master. His calm during captivity reflects his belief that he's still fulfilling his function within the experiment, still generating valuable data even through his betrayal and capture. In contrast, Marcus represents the rejection of predetermined roles, insisting that whatever brought them together, the choices they make now belong to them alone. The visual symbolism throughout the episode reinforces this theme. The controlled collapse of the Eastern Wall mirrors the controlled social experiment the sanctuary represents. Destruction engineered to test structural integrity, both physical and communal. The malfunctioning security system during Reynolds' escape attempt serves as metaphor for the false sense of control the sanctuary residents have maintained, their safety always subject to override by unseen architects. Another crucial theme is the ethics of survival at scale. Dr. Marsh's revelation about optimal path forward through controlled population reduction raises disturbing questions about utilitarian calculations in times of crisis. The decision to deploy the engineered pathogen represents the ultimate trolley problem, sacrificing millions to potentially save billions through managed reconstruction. The sanctuary leadership's horror at this calculation contrasts with their own smaller-scale versions of the same ethical dilemma. Who receives limited medical supplies? Who takes on dangerous missions whose skills are deemed essential? This moral complexity is visually represented in the sanctuary's physical layout, which we see more clearly in this episode than ever before. The concentric circles of security, with civilians at the protected center and infrastructure workers at the vulnerable perimeter, represent physical manifestations of value judgments about whose safety matters most. Sophia's civilian oversight committees attempt to democratize these decisions, while Reynolds' military protocols reinforced hierarchical determinations of worth. The episode also explores redemption and its limitations through Elena's conditional freedom. Her assistance during the crisis earns her increased trust, but not absolution. This nuanced portrayal of redemption as process rather than event suggests that rebuilding trust requires consistent action over time, not single heroic moments. The parallel between Elena's personal redemption and the larger question of whether humanity deserves another chance after its pre-collapse failures creates resonance between individual and societal scales. Perhaps most poignantly, episode 45 examines the human need for meaning in suffering. The revelation that the collapse and the sanctuary were engineered threatens to rob the community of the narrative they've constructed, that they survived through resilience, skill, and solidarity rather than because they were selected as experimental subjects. Maya's determination to understand who did this to us and why reflects this search for meaning, the need to contextualize suffering within a comprehensible framework. Two fascinating fan theories have emerged from this episode's developments. The first suggests that the various experimental sanctuaries around the world aren't simply being observed, but are being prepared for conflict with each other. That the ultimate experiment is to determine which post-collapse governance model proves most effective when communities with different organizing principles compete for limited resources. This theory is supported by the sophisticated weapons used in attacks on the sanctuary, the strategic, rather than overwhelming nature of these assaults, and Reynolds' reference to phases of the experiment. The second theory proposes that Dr. Marsh is not a defector from the architects as she claims, but a more sophisticated agent than Reynolds or Elena ever were. According to this theory, her arrival represents the next stage of testing, introducing a potential treatment that requires dividing the sanctuary's leadership and resources. Her emotional responses to the sanctuary's schools and community could be genuine or carefully calibrated performance. Supporting this theory is the timing of her arrival immediately after Reynolds' capture. the convenience of her specialized knowledge, and the observation post revealed in the episode's final shot, suggesting her departure from the sanctuary was anticipated and is being monitored. What makes these theories particularly compelling is their grounding in the show's established themes of testing human adaptability and the ethics of experimentation. Either theory would extend these themes to their logical conclusion while raising the stakes for the sanctuary community. The symbolism of thresholds permeates the episode, from the literal research facility named Threshold to the numerous boundaries crossed. Elena's transition from prisoner to conditional ally, Reynolds' movement from captive to escapee and back again, the departure team's journey beyond the sanctuary's protective walls. These threshold crossings represent moments of transformation and vulnerability, points at which identities and allegiances are tested and sometimes reformed. At its core, episode 45 asks whether genuine community can emerge from artificial circumstances, whether the connections formed in the crucible of crisis remain authentic when the crisis itself is revealed to be by design. The sanctuary residents' continued care for one another despite this devastating revelation suggests an optimistic answer that human solidarity can transcend even the most calculated attempts to reduce it to observable data. Episode 45 of Beyond the Gates represents a pivotal moment in the series' mythology, transforming our understanding of both the sanctuary and the world that collapsed around it. What began as a story of survival against natural calamity has evolved into something more complex and unsettling. An exploration of human resilience not just against disaster, but against deliberate manipulation. The revelation that the sanctuary is an engineered social experiment fundamentally alters the stakes for our characters. Their struggle is no longer simply to survive, but to reclaim agency in a system designed to study them rather than serve them. The architect's willingness to unleash a global pandemic as a controlled population reduction places these unseen antagonists in a category of villainy beyond the desperate scavengers and opportunistic warlords the sanctuary has faced before. These are enemies who view human lives as data points, suffering as necessary variables in their equations for optimal reconstruction. Yet amidst this darkness, episode 45 offers threads of hope through the very connections the experiment sought to study. Elena's gradual reintegration into the community demonstrates that loyalty can be chosen rather than programmed. Sophia's civilian oversight committees represent organic governance evolving beyond the parameters set by outside forces. The departure team's willingness to risk everything for the sanctuary's protection affirms that their community has become something worth saving, regardless of how artificially it was constructed. The episode leaves us with several crucial questions that will drive the remainder of the season. Will the Threshold facility actually contain the equipment needed to synthesize the treatment, or is Dr. Marsh leading the team into another phase of testing? If Reynolds was correct about the real threat already being inside the gates, who among the remaining sanctuary residents might be working to ensure the experiment continues according to the architect's design? And perhaps most importantly, if the team succeeds in producing a treatment that protects against the engineered infection, how will they choose to use this power? As a resource to be hoarded or shared? As a defensive measure or potential weapon? On a more personal level, the relationships between our core characters face new tests in the wake of these revelations. Marcus must lead a divided community while processing the possibility that his own survival and leadership role were predetermined parts of the experiment. Elena must navigate a community that now views her initial betrayal in a new light, as manipulation by the same forces that engineered the collapse itself. Chen and Maya's father-daughter bond faces its greatest challenge as they venture beyond the sanctuary's protection into territory controlled by the very organization responsible for the pathogen's creation. Looking ahead to episode 46, we can expect the journey to the Threshold facility to reveal new dimensions of the world beyond the sanctuary's walls. The 3-day timeline established for the mission creates a natural tension, with each passing hour increasing the risk that something has gone wrong. Meanwhile, those remaining at the sanctuary will likely discover more about the observation and manipulation they've been subjected to, perhaps finding ways to feed false information back to the architects or identifying other sleeper agents within their community. Most tantalizing is the possibility that contact with the threshold facility might put the sanctuary in communication with other experimental communities around the world, revealing different governance models and survival strategies that emerged from the same catastrophic conditions. This could exponentially expand the show's scope, transforming it from a story of one community's survival to an exploration of humanity's diverse adaptations to engineered apocalypse. Beyond the Gates continues to excel at balancing intimate personal dramas against its expanding mythology. Episode 45 reminds us that even in a world where survival itself might be part of someone else's experiment, the connections formed between people retain their authenticity and power. The architects may have selected which skills would be represented in the sanctuary, but they couldn't predict how those individuals would come together, what values they would prioritize, or what they would be willing to sacrifice for one another. As our characters grapple with the revelation that they are subjects rather than survivors, they face the ultimate test of human resilience, the ability to create meaning and purpose even within systems designed to reduce them to observable phenomena. Their refusal to accept the role of laboratory specimens, their determination to understand, resist, and potentially dismantle the experiment controlling their lives, transforms their struggle from mere survival to genuine revolution. The journey to the threshold facility represents more than a mission to secure treatment. It's the sanctuary's first proactive step toward confronting the architects directly. Whether this confrontation will lead to liberation or devastation remains to be seen, but the decision to move from defensive survival to active resistance marks a turning point in the series' narrative arc. As viewers, we are left to consider our own position within systems we didn't design but must navigate nonetheless. The algorithms that shape our information, the economic structures that determine our opportunities, the social experiments we may be unwitting participants in. Beyond the Gates asks us to consider what genuine agency looks like in a world of increasingly sophisticated manipulation, and whether authentic community can serve as both shelter and resistance against such control. Episode 45 leaves us at the threshold between accepting the parameters of the experiment and working to rewrite its terms entirely. As Chen, Maya, and Marsh venture beyond the sanctuary's boundaries, and as Marcus, Elena, Sophia, and Liam work to protect what remains within those boundaries, we witness the birth of a new phase in their struggle, one defined not by the architect's design, but by the sanctuary residents' refusal to remain passive subjects in someone else's study of human adaptability. The observation post revealed in the episode's final moments serves as both warning and challenge. They are still being watched, still generating data for unseen analysts, still playing a role in a larger design, but knowledge of the experiment changes the experiment itself, and the sanctuary's response to this knowledge may prove to be the variable the architects failed to adequately account for. If you found this breakdown of episode 45 illuminating, there's much more to discover in the world beyond the gates. Will the treatment from Threshold save the sanctuary or introduce new dangers? Is Dr. Marsh truly an ally or the architect's most sophisticated agent yet? And how will Marcus navigate leadership knowing the community itself might be designed to test his breaking point? Like, comment, and subscribe for more deep dives into this revolutionary drama series. Share your own theories about the architect's ultimate purpose and which experimental subjects might become experimental disruptors in the comments below. And join us next week as we follow our team beyond the sanctuary's boundaries and into the heart of the organization that engineered humanity's near extinction.